Russian President Vladimir Putin slammed the United States for pressuring India and China to reduce energy trade with Moscow, warning that these efforts could have economic repercussions for Washington. Now, Putin warned that imposing higher tariffs on Russia's trade partners would raise global energy prices and pressure the U.S. Federal Reserve to maintain high interest rates, a move he said could slow the U.S. economy. Now, the Russian president was speaking at the Valdai Discussion Forum in Sochi. The forum brought together security and geopolitical experts from 140 countries, including India. In response to the U.S. pressure on India to cut energy ties with Russia, Putin said that New Delhi has no reason to yield to external pressure. He added that India will never allow itself to be humiliated, saying he knows Prime Minister Narendra Modi and said that he would never make such a move.
The Indian people will look at what decisions are made by the political leadership and never accept any humiliation before anyone. And also I know Prime Minister Modi, he will never take any steps of the kind.
He also said that if India stopped purchasing Russian energy, it could face losses estimated between $9 to $10 billion. He added that the people of a country like India will closely watch the decisions made by their political leadership and will never tolerate humiliation from anyone. Now, Putin also pointed to Washington's own uranium trade with Russia, noting that while Washington continues to buy enriched uranium from Moscow, it urges other countries to halt purchases of Russian energy. The Russian president also shared his anticipation for an upcoming visit to India in early December. He directed his government to develop measures to address the trade imbalance caused by New Delhi's significant imports of Russian crude oil. Putin suggested that Russia could increase imports of agricultural goods and medicines from India. Now, just last month, the Russian president warned that the United States against using tariffs to pressure India and China, saying you cannot talk to India or China in that way. His remarks come amid a flurry of attacks on India by the U.S. over its purchase of Russian oil. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump and top officials, including the Commerce Secretary and White House trade advisor, have repeatedly criticized New Delhi in recent months over its continued purchase of Russian oil. And to discuss more, we're now being joined by Stephen Gould from Boston. He's a political analyst and lawyer. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us and joining us on the broadcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let me start by saying that now Putin is saying that New Delhi has no reason to yield to external pressure. He has added that India will never allow itself to be humiliated, saying he knows Prime Minister Modi and that he would never make such a move. Now, what's your assessment of these statements coming from President Putin?
Well, far be it from me to support the statement of a dictatorial human rights abuser and blatant aggressor like Vladimir Putin, but in this case, welcome to the world of Donald Trump, where he makes foreign policy decisions, in this case affecting India, but also affecting many other allies across the globe. He makes such decisions based on personal feelings, on narcissism, on flimsy excuses for what's really going on, which in this case, it's very possible that he's taking out on India resentment for the fact that India didn't credit him for supposedly ending the fighting between your country and Pakistan months ago, when in fact, as you know, the reality is that he had very little, if anything, to do with that. So this is how Donald Trump rolls. He insults allies. In this case, he's slapping tariffs on India that he hasn't on other countries, treating India worse than other countries, including in some respects China. But it's nothing new with him. He's threatened Canada with becoming the 51st state. He feels it should become the 51st state. He's told Denmark that the US should take over the Danish territory of Greenland. So very sadly and very typically, this is a reflection of Donald Trump's unnecessary, egregious conduct towards many countries across the world, in this case, your own.
Of course, and taking the irony a little forward, Putin has accused Washington of hypocrisy here, pointing to the U.S. uranium imports from Russia, even as it pressures others to cut energy ties. Now, having said that, how might this charge resonate with countries, let's say, like India and China?
Oh, well, I think it probably resonates in the sense that you can't rely on Donald Trump as an ally, as a trade partner, as a strategic partner. And that's a very, very sad situation because the US and India do have some great interests in common and a history that at times has been troubled, but also has been marked, especially in recent years, by friendship and alliance with respect to, for example, very notably, China's expansion or attempt to expand its influence across the globe. We've got alliances or shared interests in fighting terrorism, shared economic interests, shared personal interests in that there are many immigrants from India who are now living and working in the U.S. or have even become U.S. citizens over the years. So it resonates in a very, very negative way that reflects very poorly on the U.S. administration, but unfortunately reflects very, very accurately on how erratic Donald Trump can be and how so much of U.S. foreign policy is based on his erratic nature and his sense of being insulted even.
Right, Mr. Stephen, and Putin is clearly taking on Trump, although indirectly through the allies, and Putin has warned that the U.S. supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine could escalate tensions. Now, how should we read this? Should we interpret it as a red line or more posturing in the broader U.S.-Russia standoff?
Well, let's see how this really plays out. Donald Trump has been full of bluster before with respect to Russia. At one point, not that long ago, he was issuing all sorts of threats to Russia. Then he literally rolled out the red carpet for Putin when they had a meeting in Alaska and then completely backed away from his threats at the end of that short meeting. So let's see how that goes. In terms of the immediate issue of the U.S. providing greater aid to Ukraine, in this case, Tomahawk missiles, well, in this instance, I'm not going to feel very much sympathy for Mr. Putin. He invaded Ukraine. He's committed massive human rights abuses there. He's hurt his own country in the process in terms of hundreds of thousands of casualties. So I don't know whether this is really a red line. I don't know whether Donald Trump will go through with this or with other actions in support of Ukraine. But if he does, well, Mr. Putin has brought that on himself and sadly on Russia by virtue of his war of aggression against Ukraine.
Of course, the tussle to align our sympathies with the either side continues. But for now, thank you so much, Mr. Stephen, for joining us on the broadcast and sharing a valuable perspective with us.
Thank you for having me.